This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, this is Freddie Cohen of ESPN Radio. When I'm not talking about breaking news or breaking news on ESPN Radio, I'm always a fan and listen to the Detroit Sports Podcast, and so should you.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. This week, I extended an invitation to Kristen Keith, Fox Sports reporter and host, and she took me up on my offer. Here she is in studio here in Sterling Heights, ready to share some stories with the Doc. Welcome, Kristen. I appreciate you coming into Sterling Heights.
Thanks for having me, Johnny Mac. I'm not going with the Doc. I'm going with Johnny Mac because I'm a big Johnny McEnroe fan, so...
You were a big tennis fan?
I was actually named after Chris Everett, so they named me Kristen. My mom declines that, but my dad was a big Chris Everett fan, so yeah, that's who I was named after.
Everybody, you're listening to the One-on-One podcast series where we interview those who are working in the sports media here in Detroit. Now, Kristen, you've been here with us in Detroit since May. How has your transition been coming from the South?
Good, because it's the summer months, so it's been nice. When we get to the winter, I think I might struggle a little bit, but I haven't lived actually in really cold. I've lived in Arkansas, Texas, Florida, Arizona, all over the South for the most part, but winter months here, I don't think I'm ready for that, so we'll see. But it's been a good transition so far, about 4 months. Spent the first 3 in a hotel, so... You know, it actually wasn't that bad. I mean, other than trying to fit all your clothes into that one little room, I had my stuff in storage. But I mean, everything's paid for. You know, you got cable, you got internet, you got electricity. You don't have to worry about setting anything up. You just come in, come out. It's pretty simple. And I finally moved into a place in Ferndale and getting settled in, really liking the area, finally getting out and exploring. And still have yet to really make a lot of friends. But you know what? That'll come. I got you now, right?
Adam and I came across your broadcast when you first came to town. You're working now at Fox Sports Detroit. Tell us a little bit about your role there working at Fox Sports Detroit. Yeah,
well, they hired me at the end of April, and I moved here and started. I'll be working, obviously, Tigers. You've seen me on Tigers broadcast, and I'll be doing Pistons and Red Wings. And it'll just be either, you know, as a host or a reporter. And I think they're leaning for me more towards a reporter role, and that might just be because, you know, I'm a little bit younger than some of the other people that they have at Fox Sports Detroit on air. And I also prefer a reporting role. You know, for me, the studio is a little bit uncomfortable, and I actually had never read off a teleprompter before coming to Fox Sports Detroit, which was kind of funny. You know, everything that I had hosted before had been, you know, on location somewhere where there's no teleprompters, and, you know, you're just kind of off the cuff, which is where I'm much more comfortable. So I remember the first day I was in the studio, I was like, oh gosh, reading off a teleprompter is a lot harder than you think, just stumbling over simple basic words and whatnot. But I've gotten more comfortable with it. But I think my role will probably in the future, at least the near future, be more of a reporting role than hosting. But I'll still do both.
Tell us, fans here in Detroit, some of your early sports memories. Were you always somebody that kind of leaned toward wanting to be a reporter and a journalist? Or is this something that after schooling you just said, okay, this is something I want to do for a career?
I think I've wanted to do this probably since I was about 6 or 7. Ever since I saw that, probably, I don't know, it's maybe Susie Colbert. I've always been a big fan of hers, or Michelle Tafoya. Growing up and seeing them, the fact that they were actually, I mean, I grew up with 2 older brothers and a sports fanatic father, and we always had football on for the most part on Saturdays and Sundays. And I remember watching them and saying, how did they get on the field? How are they talking to the coaches? How are they talking to the players? This is so cool. They've got the best role. They've got the best gig. So for me, it was always kind of like, that's cool. I want to be at the game. And, you know, what better way to do it than be getting the inside story that, you know, you're telling to fans. And ever since then, it was kind of, you know, obsession with that. And I've always loved journalism. I've always had a knack for kind of investigative reporting, for a sense of like wanted to do stuff like that. But sports has been such a big passion of mine. So it just kind of naturally has always been something I wanted to do.
Who are your teams that you rooted for growing up?
You know, that's funny. Mostly college teams, because we moved around so much. My oldest brother went to Florida State, so I'm a big Florida State fan. This past weekend was pretty rough, so we should probably not talk about that. Louisville looked way too good, and Florida State looked way too bad. But always a Florida State fan. My other brother was a Gator fan, but I liked my older brother more, so I'm Florida State. Notre Dame, because I'm Catholic, so I mean, you can't go against the Irish if you're Catholic. Otherwise, you've got that Catholic guilt and for your whole life. So always Notre Dame's been in there. And honestly, my dad was such a big Arkansas fan because that's where his mother went, and that's where I ended up going, not because he pushed me there or anything, but because that's the way it turned out. I was a track and field athlete there, and they had a great program. That's why I ended up there. But he was such a big Arkansas fan, so it was more of who to root against. And we always grew up just hating the University of Texas. It was like anybody but Texas. He's more of an anti-fan, so he actually raised us to be more of anti-fans than actual fans of teams. But for me, I would say Florida State, Notre Dame, and obviously Arkansas is been my biggest teams.
You went to Arkansas after high school, and then do they have a great journalism program? Is that what you studied in college?
Yeah, it is. I actually went to Oklahoma for my first year. Arkansas did not recruit me out of high school, which was funny because I pole vaulted. It was my event in track and field, and I was pretty highly recruited out of high school for a pole vaulter. Not that every track and field program dedicates scholarships to, their field events, but at Arkansas they did, but they didn't recruit me. And I was like, oh, okay. But that was because they had a full lineup. I mean, they had a lot of seniors and whatnot. So I didn't even really look at Arkansas and Oklahoma. I loved the environment. The coach was really nice, and, I loved it. My recruiting visit was great, but I really didn't look at how coaching works and how they coach you as an athlete. And then I got there and I was like, wait, this guy doesn't really know how to coach women's pole vaulting. And it just wasn't a fit for me athletically. I loved it personally, made a lot of friends, and I had a great first year there. But I was like, all right, I need to go back to the drawing board if I really want to be a pole vaulter in college. And Arkansas was perfect timing. They were like, this is great. And gave me a scholarship and was able to go to Arkansas and vault there. And I loved it. Great journalism program. That's actually really, really growing. But I think all journalism programs right now are taking off. They're starting to put a lot of money into it. But I had a lot of really great professors, ones that, helped me. And even while I was in college, if there would be sports broadcasts to come to the area, CST would do a lot of our baseball games. And, one of our professors said, hey, Kristen, I think you'd be great for this. Why don't you be the sideline reporter for when CST comes to town? And, I got to be the sideline, reporter for a lot of our baseball broadcasts, which I loved. I mean, there's nothing better than getting hands-on experience when you're young like that. And they're doing a lot more of that kind of stuff now. And so I really enjoyed the journalism program there.
So what was your personal best in the pole vault?
420, and it's metric. So I think it's 13:10. So I was under 14, but I never made that mark. Always wanted it, but, never got it. But yeah, it's crazy to think how far the sport has come. I know I'm pole vaulting. Most people don't know much about it, but it's drastic how good the girls have gotten just in the few years that I've been gone. My former teammate, she's been out of college now for a year and a half. Sandy Morris actually took second at the Olympics this year, so she won silver. She should have won gold. She was over the bar. I mean, I got this. This was a video. I'd make you show the video. It's crazy. But she did phenomenal, and she just set the American record at 16.5. And it's just ridiculous. Like when I was in college, you could jump 14 feet, you were gold. And it's 2.5 feet higher. It's ridiculous the way the sport's taken off. 16.5 would win state, a boys' state high school track meet for, I would say probably like 35, 40 states. It's crazy what girls are jumping now. So yeah, I never had the aspirations to go farther than college, but I loved it. It was, my dad always likes to say, had I have gone to another university, I would have won so many track meets, because there's, not as much competition. But at Arkansas, pole vaulting is such a strong suit for that university and that track and field program. I won one meet my whole 4 years and I was vaulting there. But they had, at this past Olympics, they had 3 girls that were from Arkansas, which is kind of cool. 2 of those represented the U.S., which is great because you only get 3 from the U.S., and 2 of the 3 were Arkansas pole vaulters, and the other is from Slovenia, who was all former teammates of mine. And it's just cool to see all the people that you train with have such success at the sport. So I never had those ambitions, but I love watching. I still follow the sport. I was also a diver, and honestly, I picked that up in college, and that was where I loved diving. Like, pole vaulting is great, and I'll say people who really love pole vaulting, they'll do it their whole life. They go out and pole vault tomorrow. No chance. You could not pay me money to try and pole vault right now. No way. That'd be so embarrassing, and I probably couldn't clear a bar. So that's okay. I hung my track spikes up when I was done, but diving, I love diving. Had I have picked that up a little bit sooner, maybe at least a year or 2 before college, I honestly think I would have tried to dive post-collegially. Maybe try to Olympics and stuff, because it was one of those sports that I picked up so quick and I loved. I could just stay in there and train all day. I loved it. So, people used to joke around with my diving coach and say, where did this junior, like, who is this girl? Where did she come from? He's like, oh, I got her off the track team. But yeah, the crazy sports were for me, pole vaulting and diving.
Nice. No, even though you were, track and field, you were a student athlete. How was the balance of trying to try to do the best that you can at the pole vaulting, and then trying to be a successful student, studying journalism?
It was pretty hard, honestly. Arkansas was not a difficult school for me academically. So luckily, and I had really great professors who understood that I was tired all the time, and I'd have to get up at 6 a.m. to go to my diving practices, and then I'd go to track in the afternoon, and then back to diving. And I spent, I don't know, 8 hours a day probably training between the two sports. And so school for me, I didn't go to class a lot. I always did my assignments. I was always there for tests, and I always had good grades. I had 2 Bs in college, and those were in French, which you're probably not going to learn a foreign language if you don't go to class. So that's all right. I'll take those Bs. But I really didn't go to class that much. So it's a hard balance. You know what I mean? I luckily, I had no problem getting through it. But, I kind of wish I look back now and I'm like, man, I wish I would have gone to class a little bit more and had fun and, experienced it. But I was just always tired or working or training. And, I think about the people who play sports where, they're actually revenue sports, men's basketball and football, and so much pressure is put on them in those programs. And a lot of those people probably don't have the background that I grew up in and have the academics behind them. And it's tough. It's definitely tough, especially at a SEC school. Yeah.
So how many hours would you think you would put in, as an athlete in terms of the balance between student athlete? I know a lot of people are talking about it, whether, people that are really in big time sports are really getting the quality education that they deserve. But how many hours do you think you were putting in, in the athlete portion of your time there at Arkansas?
Definitely 40 hours, definitely 40 hours a week. Definitely.
Man, full time.
It was a full-time job. I would say definitely 40 hours a week. Between getting there early, warming up and actually practicing, lifting, training, everything that goes through the rehab, all of it. Yeah, definitely easy 40 hours a week. So, but you say getting the education they deserve, it's there. The opportunity's there. It's just the motivation, even for someone like me who appreciates academics a lot, the motivation's not there academically while you're there, while you're trying to train for a sport and do that and excel. So I understand it from that perspective. I just think there needs to be certain things that change in the college landscape of how, when you come in, financial planning for student athletes, and to actually teach some of these kids how to handle the checks that they're getting, and how to budget out for meals and for living and whatnot. And if they're sending money back home, I really think that's important, because a lot of student athletes, when they first start getting checks, they send the money back home or they spend it like this, and they don't really know what they're doing. And especially athletes who go on to have successful careers as professional athletes, they're making big paychecks. I mean, you see how many guys go bankrupt so quickly. I think there's a lot of things like that should change when you come into college, but it's hard for me to say because, I never had, like I said, those aspirations to play professionally. So. Okay.
So what were your goals now? You went and majored in journalism. At the beginning of college, when you first start, you're like, okay, I think I want to become a reporter. I want to do this. Going into your educational experience at Oklahoma and then subsequently at Arkansas, what were your goals after you completed your education?
This exactly what I'm doing now is what I wanted to be doing. I always knew this is what I wanted to do. I always knew that I wanted to be either a sideline reporter or a host or covering a team, whether it was college or professional, that this is what I wanted to do. And no matter what it took production-wise to get there. I've done several different jobs in production, but whether it's behind the camera or in front of the camera, I could work as a cameraman right now. I could work, I've worked as a stage manager on the primetime ESPN college football crew for the last couple years, and that taught me so much about what goes on during a broadcast, and I love it. I appreciate it. It doesn't matter. Don't tell them this, but I would do it for free. The experience that you get from being on broadcast at a certain level, and the quality and the people that you're around, the learning experience is second to none. And you can't really be taught that. That's the difficult thing about this industry. They teach me how to edit and how to shoot and stuff like that, which is good, the basics, but actually getting in the field and doing it on a deadline, and knowing how to do all of that and actually turn it into a real broadcast, a real show, and see how that comes together. They really don't teach you that in college. You need hands-on experience. So I've been able to get that mostly post-collegiately, other than those sideline reporting experiences that I got in college, which are great And I think a lot more broadcasts are doing that. When they when they go to schools, they'll ask professors and say, hey, for a runner, we need a runner. You guys have any students that you want to recommend? And they get to help out that way, which I think is really, really important for the hands-on experience. And a lot more universities are starting to put their own studios in and do their own shows and stuff like that. And at Arkansas, they did have one, but I could never make it because it always conflicted usually with my practice time. So I was actually, I got to do a few things, but rarely ever did I get to participate in some of those kind of extracurricular activities, as you'd say with the student broadcast programs.
Now, whether it be at Oklahoma or Arkansas, who were some of your mentors that you looked to and taught you kind of things to, in your experiences, at school or outside of school? Who were people that you looked to, or someone that took you under their wing and really showed you, hey, this is a way you want to act professionally, or how do you want to act in the journalistic field? Did you have any mentors?
Oh God, that's crazy. No, I don't. That's hard. I've had some teachers that really. I had probably two teachers that I would say. One, Larry Foley, who's the head of the journalism department, and he does amazing documentaries. He's actually got one called The Boys of Summer, which he's got several that he's Emmy nominated, Emmy award winning documentarian, I guess is the proper term. And he takes a real interest in his students and kind of shows them and says, hey, like this is what to do, this is what not to do. But I mean, it wasn't just with me, it was with everybody. And another professor, Dennis Kirkpatrick, who had broadcast experience, directing and producing experience at the, at high levels like Fox and ESPN. And he came in and taught, and he's the one who actually got me those roles as sideline reporting and, kind of said, hey, this is the avenue you need to go down, or, hey, if you really want to do this, this is what you need to do. Watch every broadcast that you can. Take notes while you're watching. What's she asking? What's he asking? What's going on? Pay attention to those post-game press conferences and try and think, like a fan and like a journalist. And what would you ask if you were in there? So, kind of just getting the wheels turning, always stuff like that. But I don't think I ever had anybody say, hey, don't do this or don't do that until, maybe I did it. It was kind of one of those people. It's more of like ask for forgiveness, not for permission. And I think you can tell that.
No, that's great. Now, in looking at some of the things you did, I seen in the summer of 2009, were you an intern at 17 Magazine?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
What'd you do there?
So that came through the journalism department. They have all these internship programs, and it was on a bulletin, and it was like New York City. I'd go to New York City for a summer and work at a magazine. Done. Cool. Signed up. They said, sure, come be an intern. So I actually got to live in New York City the summer of 2009, which was fun. And to be honest, I didn't do anything. I bagged jewelry and inventoried it and took it back to whatever store, loaned it to them for the pictures, and it was nothing that I would ever recommend honestly doing, but I got to live in New York City for a summer, which was the experience in and of itself was really special.
So what's it like living in New York City? How old were you at the time in 2009?
I was 21, and it was amazing. I mean, that's it's a city that never sleeps, and you go there, and I think I had like 2 really big suitcases with as much clothes as I could fit. And that was about it. So, I mean, it was kind of one of those experiences that I had never, I come from a very sheltered background. And, my parents were terrified that I still honestly to this day can't believe that they said yes for me to do it. My dad especially, but I did. And I lived in NYU housing. But it was really nice, like apartment style with 2 other girls who were there also doing internship programs for the summer. And it was cool. I mean, just learning. The hardest part was learning how to try and budget in New York City because everything is so expensive, and learning how much it was actually going to cost. I'm like, oh, no big deal. I don't have a car. I don't have to worry about gas. But then I didn't realize it was going to cost me $100 a month to take the subway. I didn't plan for that. Just little things like that, life lessons, and having to try and get to work on time, get there at 8 a.m. in the hustle and bustle in a city like that. That was interesting for a while, but it was fun. You learned a lot. Met a lot of cool people, and the experiences were fun. I lost, I don't know if it was stolen or lost, but I had a little wristlet that had my license, my credit card, pretty much everything that I needed, actually. I had that on my wrist, and I lost it at some point, making away from my place to a friend's place. And we were going to go out, and I was like, I have no idea where it is, call, cancel, but I don't have any backup form of ID. So we're going out. She knows of this new hot spot, this club to go to. It was One Oak, and it's still a hot spot now. But this is probably like in its heyday, like right. It was pretty new at the time, and it was the place to be. She's like, I can get us in tonight. We got to go. And I was like, all right, sweet. So we go, and the guy's like, ID, and I was like, well, I see. And he's just looking at me, and it was one of those busty, mean door guys. It's like, let's get this girl out of here. And I'm like, wait. So I pull up at this time, I had an iPhone. I don't know if it was the first generation or second or 3G probably, but still slow as heck internet. But I was able to pull up my athlete bio at Arkansas that had my date of birth on it. And I was like, look, see, I'm 21. And I embarrassed the guy so bad. He's like, just get inside. Just get inside. So they let me in. I get inside and, we're talking, having a good time and, loving the New York City nightlife. And these two guys, we're talking to these two guys, my friend and I. And what do you do? What do you do? And well, they play hockey. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Where do you play hockey? Like, at your school or something? I'm like, no, we play professional hockey. I was like in the NHL. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, no, you don't. And I'm looking at these guys. I'm sizing them up. And, I had probably a drink or two in me. And I start talking a little bit of trash. And it turns out that the two, and at this time, your phone was not fast enough and it didn't work in the club. So I couldn't just quickly Google these guys to see if they were telling the truth or not like I would now. And they were both smaller than me. I remember that. And I was in heels, but I was like, there's no way. I was like, I'd take you back out. I could kick your ass right now. I'm just talking mad smack to these guys. And they're getting a really good laugh out of it. And so I was like, all right, forget about it. I leave. I go home. And in the cab on the way home, I look them up. Turns out they are in the NHL. And it was Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves of the Chicago Blackhawks. And, now every time I see them playing, I get a good crack out of it. And just, it's a pretty good laugh. But that summer was fun. That's for sure.
And now upcoming, the Red Wings season, the Detroit Red Wings, Chicago Blackhawks rivalry. That'll be a nice joke. Kristen Keith can kick their ass.
Right.
That'll be awesome.
But they are smaller than me. So I'm still shocked at that. Like, I had no idea that every time I watch them, I'm like, sometimes it's hard to get a good size, especially in hockey with the skates. It's hard for me to judge the height and the size of the players just based off TV. And ever since then, I'm like, all right. Don't judge a book by its cover.
Exactly. That's a great story. Your time in New York was fruitful. Did you ever think that maybe I could live here dealing with the people, the cost? Did you ever think, because, bright lights, big city, a lot of people will say, if you're coming from a small town and you go, okay, if I want to be a journalist, everyone knows the action's in New York. Do you ever think maybe that's a big town like that is for you?
I'm definitely a city girl, but at the same time, not New York City, because I like to be able to have my car. I like to be able to drive to the grocery store. I like the ease and the comfort of having, a garage and a house to walk up into. It's nice and simple. As much as I love high rises in the buildings, it's just, there's too much, I guess, hustle and bustle of everyday, which I would say like issues, whether it's not walking up so many stairs or this, and just little things that would bother me as a person, that the way I grew up, that would irritate me, that I could probably handle better, but, New York City definitely brings it out in you, and maybe that's why some people aren't super happy there. But for me, it's one of those places to go get away, like I said, for maybe a couple months here or there, if I'm working, fly in and out, but it's not somewhere I would ever probably live long term.
Okay, recall for us your first job interview. Where was it? And take us through the experience of, okay, you're probably done with school, or maybe a little bit of time passes and you're like, okay, it's time for me to start earning money in a job that I'm in. What was it like, your first interview, and what was your first job?
First interview was with the news director at 4029, which was the ABC affiliate in Northwest Arkansas. And it was about a week before graduation. And I was what position? I was an editor position, I think, or an AP. This is, the lowest of low that you can get in local news. So it was a nothing position, but that's where you start. You got to do it. And at least it was in a market that I was comfortable in. And I think at the time, Northwest Arkansas was market size 100 or 101, which isn't bad. Most people start in much smaller markets. And so I was like, all right, we're going to give this a go. And there had been interest. My professor had said, hey, I talked to the news director about you. You should definitely interview for this position. So I did. And it went well, and they hired me, and I started work. I graduated on a Saturday, and I started the first job on a Monday. But, I remember going in and thinking, well, I was so overwhelmed, and it was just really cool to see a real studio. I had only been in the studio, I guess, at our university, which was real small, and just from seeing the control room to being in the studio and seeing how everything went, and learning their systems, and local newscasts, you have really tight deadlines, and at the time, you were editing tape to tape for the most part. So I was rewinding tapes, and it's not digital the way it is now. And God, that was tough. But luckily it changed while I was there. But it made me a really good editor, and I enjoyed that. And then I transitioned a few months after into a sports reporter for them, and which was great because I was covering the Hogs and knowing so many coaches and athletes and backgrounds, that was easy. It was an easy transition to do for me as a first job. No, I wasn't good at it. If I watched any of my stuff now, I'd be like, oh God, why did I do that? But that's just the learning curve. That's just the way it goes, trying to get experience, your first job.
And so now you're a reporter at Fox Sports Detroit, and people will say, in the journalism field, you kind of start to realize that maybe you could have to travel and, in order to advance yourself in different markets and things like that. How has the transition been going from market to market and now coming from, Dallas to Detroit?
Yeah, it's been interesting. It's definitely part of the way this works, this whole industry. It works. You got to be ready to do that. And like I had mentioned earlier, I've worked, a number of roles in production, and probably the one that's had me travel the most. I worked as a stage manager on a college football crew for ESPN, and I loved it, because of everything that I learned during those broadcasts. I got to work with, some of the best. Holly Rowe was a sideline reporter, and I learned so much information from her. She taught me so much, and she's definitely somebody that I idolize in this industry. So getting that kind of hands-on experience is great, but I traveled a lot. I had a full-time job while I was working with these crews where I would work on the weekend, and then I had a full-time job Monday through Friday. So I actually traveled for that Monday through Friday full-time job, where I was actually a reporter for Campus Insiders and the Big 12 Digital Network, covering the Big 12. And I would travel on Monday. I'd fly out to Big 12 school. I'd shoot feature stories myself as a one-man band Monday and Tuesday, fly back either Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. I'd edit all day and night, Wednesday and Thursday, and as much as I could on Friday. And then I'd fly out to wherever our game was and do my role with them. And meanwhile, be trying to prep and get ready for my next interviews and wherever I'm flying out to next week with the Big 12 and the stories that I'm working on there. So it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. But at the same time, I really wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, I think from August, probably Big 12 media days to the national championship, I mean, I had no days off. And yeah, you get tired and whatnot, but the second that you start having days off, you're like, oh, what am I doing? You're twiddling your thumbs and you miss it. And I love the grind of that. I love the grind of the industry. I love the way that the way this business works is when everybody is doing their job and a broadcast comes together. I love watching that. I love seeing it, and the travel is part of it. Now, I'm not a great traveler. I mean, I am a great traveler. I'm very efficient, but I'm not a happy traveler, is what I mean. You know what I mean? So I'm not one to stand in line or wait. I'm not a patient person at all. So that's a little bit tough for me. The grind of that, and anybody who travels a lot knows that it takes it out of you when you fly. Like, you're not doing anything, but you land and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm zapped. I'm tired. Why am I so tired? So that was hard, but it's part of the industry. And I have no problem traveling or picking up to be able to do the job that I love.
Have you done any special interest stories, and what are some of the stories that you recall in your mind as being very important and long-lasting for you?
Yeah, I mean, feature stories are definitely what I enjoy doing. I'd say that's kind of eventually down the line. That's probably what I will want to focus on only. I love stories. I love shows like E60, and I love 30 for 30. I mean, I think everybody does. It's the way they tell the story, the in-depth, the sound bites that they're able to get, the human emotions that they're able to evoke from their viewers is so special. And so I read a lot. I have a list of favorite writers, that are great feature writers. And that's kind of like, that's what I want to be able to do, but on video.
Who's on the list?
And you put me on the spot. I'll come back to it. But that's definitely what I want. You said one of my favorite stories is just the first one that came to mind was a story. This Iowa State was playing TCU in football last year. TCU was actually playing in Ames, and they have kid captains that come out on the field and get to be there for the coin toss. And a little girl with cerebral palsy by the name of Abby Faber she was there. She was in her wheelchair. She's, having a good time. And Trayvon Boykin, she's an Iowa State fan. She's got an Iowa State jersey on. And Trayvon Boykin, the quarterback for TCU, looks over and he just says, hey, how's it going? What's your name? And bends down and talks to her. Now, someone gets a great photo of it in a surface, made the internet, made the rounds. But it's stories like that how it went viral, and how the fact that, hey, opposing team with this fan right here has a minute when he is supposed to be dead, locked in, serious, thinking about the game. It's like he realizes that there's more than just this game. The life's bigger than that. And it was just a picture, totally encompassed that. And TCU fans fell in love with it. Iowa State fans fell in love with it. And actually a TCU booster got Abby Faber and her family on a private jet and flew them down to a TCU game, I think a week or two later. And I got to go and meet them and be in the suite with them. And they hung out with Gary Patterson, TCU head football coach, his wife and her suite. And TCU took complete care of this family and just completely brought them in. And it was just really cool to see the way that a fan base rallied around this family. They started TCU student, I think, started a GoFundMe account for Abby and her family because she's going to have several medical procedures over the course of her life. And, those are expensive. And they were able to raise, I think at the time after it's only a week, they raised like $35,000 for the family, which is incredible. It wasn't only Abby, but she had, I think, three brothers and sisters. Let's see, a brother, a sister, I think four kids total in the family. And they were all so well behaved and so polite. And to see the way they treated Abby and they took care of her, it was special. This was a special family. It wasn't just the fact that TCU took this family, and it was how great of a family this is, how deserving they were of this treatment, and to see, how touched they were and how much they appreciated it. And stories like those that make you love sports. And that was one that I actually got to be, up close and personal and help tell. That's probably my favorite.
Is there a current topic going on in sports now that you'd want to go into a little bit more and delve into, like, an E60 profile that's on your mind?
Right now?
Concussions in the NFL, baseball and minorities, anything like that piques your interest?
I mean, you talk about baseball and minorities, and what Adam Jones said totally resonated, actually.
What did Adam Jones say, for those that don't know the story?
Well, when Adam Jones, he said that baseball is a white man's sport. It's a white man's game. And now, no, it's not completely dominated by white players, and that's not what he meant. But I think he meant by the history of the game, it being America's pastime, and the fact that you're not going to see anybody sitting or kneeling for the anthem in baseball. You're just not going to see it. And it was really funny because I think the day that he said that, I was actually working. I was down at Comerica Park covering the game that day. And, whenever they play the national anthem, I usually just glance at the teams and stuff like that. And I remember when it started, I glanced at the team and I thought to myself, I literally had this thought, and I said, well, no, it's baseball. I was like, I don't need to be looking for someone kneeling. Is that a story? No, it's baseball. That thought actually crossed my mind. And then later, I think the next day, the article came out, and I was like, it's really true. But he's got a lot to be said for it. And I think that just bringing light to the fact that the way the game is run is interesting. I mean, he had a lot of really good points to say. So that's definitely something I would delve into, the minorities in the sport.
Is there an athlete that's caught your attention, whether it be in college or professional, that you say, I'd like to sit down for maybe an hour and a half with them and see what makes them tick?
Good question. That's a really good question. Oh, man. Put me on the spot. Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey's up there for me because he's a bright guy and he's able to do it all. And he comes from a family of exceptional athletes. Brothers, sisters, mom, father. They're all exceptional athletes. So it's kind of one of those things that, I just love to pick his brain and see, is this something that you always knew that you were destined for? Just because it's in the bloodline, did you feel pressured to do it? And he's also a great student, really smart kid, really nice kid. I think that's kind of interesting, and what he's been able to do. And I mean, honestly, last year, part of me thought he should have won the Heisman, and this Louisville quarterback, might have something to say about it this year. But coming into the season, Christian McCaffrey already had my vote. I was saying he's going to be the Heisman winner this year. So, I mean, he's just an incredible athlete, what he's able to do. And I don't think the Pac-12 got nearly as many looks because of the time slots that they were in. And a lot of people didn't see them play and what he was able to do. But he's an incredible athlete, and he poises himself really well. But he's kind of that calm, quiet, confident leader, humble guy who comes from a really, really interesting background. So yeah, he's one that I'd like to sit down and talk to probably.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people in the media tell me that one of the most important things is to read, is to be informed, spend about a lot of time reading articles, different websites. What kind of websites do you look to when you're looking at sports? And you said double back to, who are the writers that you find to be entertaining and ones that you kind of check out their articles regularly?
Well, Twitter's your best friend in that sense. I wish I could follow a lot more people, but I really don't follow any friends or family members. People I follow are either athletes or other journalists for the most part in sports. And I mean, that's for a reason, I mean, you get the best stories that way. I go to Twitter and I get all everything that I need. I read an article by Jordan Ritter-Kahn, who's I think he used to work for Grantland. Anyway, I think he might work for ESPN now, but he's a features writer, and he wrote a great article about Justin Blackman. So he wrote a really good feature about him. This is maybe 2 weeks ago, and I highly recommend looking into this feature if you haven't read it. And it took me, I mean, I'm not a fast reader, so the some of these stories you do need to read in this business, but I'm not a fast reader by any means. The story probably took me 30 minutes to read, but it was worth it. This story evoked so much emotion, and he didn't even get any sound bites from Blackman. He didn't sit down with him. He went to his town, figured out what's happened to this kid. You know, he one of the highest NFL picks. You think he's going to be destined for greatness, and he just kind of disappears. What happens to him? He gets in trouble with DWI. He clearly has a drinking problem, but this is a kid who's got that, you know, that effervescence about him that says success and says happiness, and it's kind of like, what's the hole? What's the deep dark secret in this guy that's prevented him from being great? And his feature was amazing on him without actually understanding or knowing what's going on in Blackman's mind, and just getting the sound bites of coaches and people around town that see him. He was able to tell a really compelling story, which I thought that's amazing to do for me. Like, if you, without getting a first person interview with your subject, I mean, that was probably one of the favorite articles I've read.
Okay, so rank these sites for me in order of what I'd like to check out. Bleacher Report, Sports Illustrated, ESPN. How would you rank those 3 sites?
I don't go directly to the sites.
Okay.
So that's, I mean, I usually look on Twitter. If I'm going for sports scores, you know, I'll probably open up my ESPN app. If I just want sports scores and box scores and whatnot, the app is great for that. You know, I can get it really fast. It's the fastest way I can do that. But I would say articles and previews and whatnot, Bleacher Report is great for that. I love the way Bleacher Report previews games. They do a really good job with that. And they also do a pretty good job with, you know, their top 10 or top 5 montages they put together and you know, past plays and whatnot like that. But that's hit or miss. That's stuff that I find on Twitter and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Let's click on that. Those are probably the top 2. And Sports Illustrated for me is more of if I'm gonna go there for features. So I'm gonna go there for more in-depth knowledge. So for me, those 3 sites, I don't even compare them. They're all different to me. I don't look at them the same. And
those sites are ranked low on my bookmarks compared to FoxSportsDetroit.com. You know, that's where I go first to make sure I get all the sports needs. You're working in a very tough industry, in the sports industry, and you know there's a lot of young women that want to, you know, be on TV and be reporters. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's now, you know, the person entering into college, 18, 19, and they're gonna, you know, sign up and be and when they're gonna declare themselves a journalism major? What advice would you give them that would help them get through this very tough field that you're in?
Have a backup plan. Find another job.
What was your backup plan?
Honestly, that's a great question, you know, because I still think about that.
Mm-hmm. If you weren't doing this job, what would you be doing?
A race car driver, maybe.
Yeah, race car driver.
I get pulled over enough. I could be a race car driver. No, I don't know. That's a really good question, because there's not a lot that I'm really passionate about. I'd probably be working with animals. Honestly, I love animals. Or if I could work for the Animal Planet or Nat Geo, all over that. I don't know how well I could be outside like all night and camp and stuff like that, because I'm not. Again, I'm a city girl, but I love animals. So something along those lines, maybe something in production with, you know, a site like that or a show like that would be cool. But no, for advice for young people in this industry, you got to have thick skin and you got to have hands-on experience. That's it. I had someone email me the other day, do I need a website? Do I need this? Do I need that? You know, yeah, it's nice to have if you have time, but if you don't really have time to make one and make it great, no one who's going to offer you a job really has that kind of time to dig through your website. They're not going to dig. They're not going to go through it. So yeah, if you got one and it's not a big deal for you to build a website, go for it. But it's just an added bonus. You know what I'm saying? Like, half the time you send out a reel, I don't think most people watch it. Most people probably don't get past the first minute of your resume reel. So you better make that minute your best stuff. You know what I mean? This is a very fickle industry, and a lot of times it's about who you know. This job that I got was not about, I didn't know anybody. You know, I lucked into this job. The guy who hired me, who is unfortunately no longer with the station at all, which, you know, has been a little bit tumultuous for me emotionally, saying, oh gosh, you know, I just got here, I'm packed up, I moved all the way from Texas here, and now I'm kind of like, you know, uncertainty. But that's the industry. That is the nature of this beast, and you have to be ready for that at any time. And I knew that, and I said it was a risk that I took. I knew that when I signed my contract to come up here, and I still know that, and no regrets. You know what I mean? That's the way the industry works. You have to be ready for that. In a sense, it's very much like it's very much like baseball. You know what I mean? Or it's very much like, this industry to me is very much like the minor leagues of working your way up. You know, and are you going to get there? You don't know, but you got to put your time in, and it's not easy. The people who I think respect the most in this industry are the people who have put their time in and have worked their way up. There have been people who've been thrown on quite early at young ages who have impressed. Kaylee Hartung, Samantha Ponder. You know, those are two who were thrown on early, but they have an incredible work ethic and drive that has allowed them to do that, and they're very intelligent women. So, but this is not an industry that's, if someone came up to me, right out of college and said, hey, do you want to do this job? And it could have been my dream job. I mean, yeah, I would want to do it, but no, you're not ready. You know what I mean? You need to work your way up. You need to get that experience because it's very much a learning process, every bit of it. So, I'm still learning. I learn every game, every broadcast, I'm learning something new. And I enjoy it. But this is not an easy industry to work in by any means, so you definitely need to have a thick skin and get as much hands-on experience that you can get and be comfortable saying that, the pay might not be what you want it to be. I mean, my first job out of college, I think I made more money. I'm part Native American, I'm part Osage Indian, and my mom was nice enough to fill out all the paperwork, so I would actually get money every semester from Osage, and they paid me a pretty penny. And because I was on scholarship, a lot of that money just came in the form of a check and went into my checking account. And my parents are probably still wondering where did that money actually go? But and so am I. But I made more money in that sense from what my parents and what Osage was putting into my bank account and my scholarship in college, probably twice as much than I did in my first job, which is crazy. I'm saying, oh my gosh, I wish I was still in college. How could I be making more as a college student than in my first job? But that's the way it works. And I mean, it's tough. It's not, you don't make money as a journalist, especially not to begin with. Maybe if you're at the very top, you're the 1%, but that's it. You got to love it. You got to love telling stories. You got to love asking the questions that nobody else wants to ask and, getting some of the answers back that you probably don't want to hear back. And you just got to be able to do it every day. Got to have thick skin.
And nowadays, there's a lot of talk, a lot of reports about women covering sports. And a lot of it's focused on some of the negative perceptions that men may have towards women in the field. Have you experienced any challenges like that, from negative, nasty messages on Twitter to people saying that, a woman has to know 6 times as much as a man because maybe some men think that women cannot do your job. Do you feel that? And have you experienced that on some level, mean tweets and stuff like that?
Oh, absolutely.
How do you handle it?
I've gotten a lot of mean tweets, and it's most of the people who have mean stuff to say don't actually tweet at me, which is good. So thank you for that. But I don't mind it. A lot of it, sometimes it's criticism. My first, let's see, I came from working the college landscape. For me, I remember the first couple of broadcasts, I made a mistake of starting my interview off with Brad Ausmus of saying, or ending it, thanks, coach. You don't call a manager coach. Simple things like that. You don't call a clubhouse a locker room. Simple changes like that, that
people responded to right away.
Absolutely. This girl doesn't know what she's talking about. It's just slip of the tongue, because for me, I'm fairly young, and for me to address Brad Ausmus by his first name and say Brad, to me, that almost feels a little bit disrespectful. So for me to say coach is more respectful in that sense. So it's just a natural thing that, oh man, I did it again. Just mistakes like that, I'm not focused on that. I'm focused on what I'm asking him or whatever was going on in the game. Slips like that, people give you a hard time about on Twitter, which, is stupid, but that's the way it goes, but at the same time, it made me aware of it and say, hey, don't do it again. You know what I mean? And just little things like that. I had someone correct me. I used, what word did I use? I was telling the great story, Clarissa Shields, 2-time gold medalist boxer, throughout the first pitch last week. And during my in-game report, I said she probably hadn't gotten the notoriety that she deserved. Well, notoriety is not the right word to use, but I really didn't even realize that notoriety had a negative connotation with it. I probably said she probably hadn't gotten the fame or the acclaim that she deserved, but little things like that. It was probably an English teacher watching, you know what I mean? But stuff like that, I actually do appreciate, because in this business, it's always about the next show. It's always about the next broadcast, wash, rinse, repeat. You don't get a lot of critique from your coworkers. It's like I see something on Facebook the other day. A teacher writes out 9 times 1 equals 7, 9 times 2 equals 18, 9 times 3 equals 27. She writes 10 problems down and she gets 9 right, but misses the first one. The kids are making fun of her, and she says, I want you to learn this lesson. No matter how many times you do something right, people are still going to call you out for the one time you do something wrong. And that's very much the way that this business works. No one's going to say, hey, good job. That's the way it works. But I appreciate being critiqued. Now, a lot of times there are mean stuff that's going to be said, whether it's you're fat or why are you wearing that? And I understand the back end of that. I mean, before this, we talked about, women in sports, and if they really are journalists, why do they have to look the way they do and be all dressed up and whatnot for TV if they're just journalists? Well, a lot of people that are watching don't really care what I have to say. You know what I mean? They don't care what a lot of women in sports have to say. You know, I go back to even my own household. We're watching a game, you know, first thing, or not even a game, we're watching the news. We come on before even listening to what people have to say. My dad will be like, why is she wearing that? Look at her hair. My mom will do the same thing. And I'm like, hello, like, goodness gracious, do you realize what industry I work in, mom and dad? You know, they'll do it, but it's human, you know? So you have to play into it a bit, but I try not to read too much into the Twitter of it all. And there's definitely a double-edged sword of being a woman in this industry. You know, at times a lot of people don't think you know what you're talking about. You know, even the athletes that you're interviewing or coaches that you're interviewing, they don't think you know what you're talking about. But it doesn't matter. You know, I don't care what they think of me. As long as I'm able to provide some sort of content and ask a question that's going to help you as a viewer or you as a fan learn something, that's it. My job is done. That's my job. My job isn't to impress the viewer with what I know. I'm not an analyst. You know, I'm a reporter. I'm there to get information and facts. My opinion doesn't matter. What I know really does not matter. And so that's something that you have to keep in mind, especially when you do hear a lot of critique and you hear from people that say, you know, well, she doesn't know anything. Well, to be honest with you, it doesn't matter. A lot of times I covered an equestrian meet and I had no idea what the heck, how equestrian was scored. I had no idea at all about the sport. And that was one of the best things I've ever done because I knew nothing about it. I went in with more of an open mind and I was able to ask the questions that needed to be asked. And I learned so much about it. It was one of the best things that I've covered. So you don't always necessarily even, you know, it's not necessary. I don't need to impress anybody with what I know. I just need to ask the questions that's going to help you as a viewer and you as a fan learn what you want.
How has been your experience interviewing some of the Tigers and manager Brad Ausmus? I know sometimes it can be a little bit contentious with who's asking the question and what some of the fans may want asked. How would you describe your interview style, and how is it like interviewing some members of the Detroit Tigers?
I'd say it's evolving. You know what I mean? Especially when you learn, you know, a new team and meeting a new manager, and every time I interview him, you know, I feel a little bit. I think it's gone pretty well. In the sense that it's a new team. It's hard to jump on a new beat. It's hard because I don't know these guys, you know, their personalities. I know their backstories. I can read their bios. I can do as much research, you know, as possible. But really, the connection is how well you know them as a person and how well you're able to pull out information from them that you that a viewer or a fan wants to know. Brad is fickle. You know, you pretty much know what you're going to get. For the most part, every time I look and I think about the questions I'm going to ask Brad, I can probably tell you what he's going to be able to tell me. It's the times that he surprises me that I enjoy the most, or that, you know, there'll be witty banter back, or, you know, he'll make a joke and you really enjoy that. But I mean, he's in his third season. So that's expected. You know, I don't get the kind of conversations or interviews with Brad that maybe I would like. I don't get him to open up as much as maybe I would like or that fans would like. But I think that's because of his youth as a manager. So I think that will come. Same thing, you know, with the players. We don't speak to Miguel Cabrera very often. And when we do, it's hit or miss, to be honest. He hates being interviewed. You know, he's the nicest guy, but he really just hates being interviewed. So it's kind of one of those things that we respect that. And when we do interview him, you know, we're going to be clear and concise, and we're not going to try and take up too much of your time. And I think it was Trevor Thompson was in the clubhouse maybe a week or two ago, probably a week and a half ago, and they were interviewing Miggy, and he gave some great sound bites. And he talked especially about Twitter, not looking at your phone, not looking at social media, giving this team, you know, the hope, keeping it alive. Don't look at that stuff because it's detrimental. It's detrimental to you. It's detrimental to the team. You need to stay positive, especially this time of the year when you're trying to make the postseason. And he said that, and the way that he said it was great. You know, and hearing a player like that, someone who should have all of the confidence in the world, regardless of what people say, it humanized him. You know what I'm saying? It's saying that somebody who is that good at his game, who makes that much money, you know, who's able to produce the way that he is for the Tigers, is human, and actually says that there are things that people say can bring him down to it. You just realize, hey, he's human. He's just like the rest of us. You know, just another reminder, hey, yep, I need to stay off Twitter too. Don't always look at those notifications.
In your job, it's kind of a double-edged sword, and I talk to the guys a lot about why are athletes and managers so PC? Why are they so guarded? Why are they so reluctant to kind of give more insight into what they're doing as athletes, as managers? And really, the role of the media is a conduit from them to the fans. And so I sometimes question why they do it. But then, in talking about what you talked about, Miggy used the word stay positive. And that's been kind of used now when the team has struggled and things like that, and kind of talking about the fans. Do you think that because of the 24-hour nature of the media and having information go viral and being talked about so much, that these athletes have no other choice but to be bundled and to be PC? And I always ask myself, like, okay, if I was an athlete, I would probably get in trouble for being too real, because I'm just an honest, straight shooting kind of guy. But I understand the other side, where you have to protect the organization. You have to kind of not create media storms. And so it just must be tough on your end to try to get information for the fans, at the same time understanding that these guys don't really want to talk to you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at Fox Sports Detroit, we're partnered with the team. We love this team. We don't want any bad flack or media attention to go towards this team. So everything we have to do is positive. We love this team. We want to show them in a positive light. But at the same time, you still have to ask real questions and try and get real answers. But social media has created such a, excuse my language, but shitstorm. Overnight, instantaneously, someone says something, it's going to be on Twitter in 2 seconds. Someone's going to have that as a video replaying over and over and over again. And that's stressful as an athlete to relive. You know what I mean? Like, if I make a mistake, someone's probably going to call me out on Twitter, but it's only a handful of people. Only a handful of people really saw and cared enough to tweet at me and say something. It's different if you're a player. It's different what these guys have to go through and deal with. So to me as an athlete, if I was in their shoes, I wouldn't even be on social media. It's best just to completely stay off of that. But that's hard, especially if you're young. So yeah, I understand why they're guarded, for sure. That definitely makes the job that much harder. But at the same time, I also understand that if they wanted to, they can use the media to their full advantage. The media will eat up what they say if they say it in the right way. So part of it, I think, if they are taught how to do that, then, which, they should be, that the PR team should be teaching these guys how to handle the media, how to deal with them. It can be gold. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can go either way. It can go whatever way these guys want it to go. It's whatever you're saying to the media, that whether or not it takes off. So, I mean, I think that if they can figure that out and get control of it, you might get better stuff. But then again, you've always got those beat writers in there who are pushing and asking over and over the same question 5 different ways because they're looking for a certain answer, which is part of their job. You know what I mean?
This might be a tough question, but I'm interested to get your side of it, because, I talk to guys like, Vito, guys like Adam that are here at the network, and they talk about issues in the journalistic field, and they talk about kind of where we see things going. And you see now with DetroitLions.com, the Detroit Tigers have their own website. How do you feel about maybe the trend going a little bit more towards team-run websites, where it's a little bit more slanted towards PR than journalism? Because everyone knows that, okay, if you're working for DetroitLions.com, you have kind of a little bit of a slant. And it seems like, from what I see, just as a regular guy here in Detroit, that it's moving towards that a little bit, where I feel like the teams are trying to squeeze out you guys in the media and only giving us kind of PR. What do you think?
No, they definitely are. My previous role was in a role very similar to that when I worked for Campus Insiders, which is a digital network based out of Chicago, partnered with 120 Sports. 120 is the professional sports coverage, while Campus Insiders is college. And I covered the Big 12 for them. And I was based in Dallas out of the Big 12 conference office. And because we were in partnership with the conference, we were buddy-buddy. Anything that I was going to report on wasn't going to be hard-hitting. It was going to be through the schools, because they knew we were partnered with the conference. I got more access. I got just about the same amount of access that the schools would give their video departments. So it was really nice, because, yeah, you got that access. But at the same time, it's because you're basically, like you said, PR for them. You're giving them PR. Now, I think there's a certain role for that. If you're showcasing a new stadium, or if you're showcasing a new locker room, doing behind the scenes fun stuff like that, or going in and seeing what, the coach's pregame pep talk is to the team before they go out and stuff like that. I think that stuff's great. I love behind the scenes stuff like that. But if you want hard hitting stories and journalism, it's not good for that. It definitely does hurt it. But I think there's a place for both in there, whether, PR is still trying to push out. But that's why, those beat writers, that's their job. As you see, if you watch any Raw press conferences, there's always a beat writer or two in there that might tick a coach or player off, that they're like, oh, this guy again, because that's the guy who's going to get the story. That's the guy who's going to push you until you say, until you snap. He's going to get that. He's going to get the deep down story. And that's the kind of journalism that takes off on social media and that people really do appreciate. So I don't think that's going anywhere that's not going away anytime soon. But I think the method of getting it is probably a little bit harder now than it used to be.
Kristen Keith, kind enough to spend an hour with us sharing stories about her role as a journalist and her work at Fox Sports Detroit. Now, before we wrap up, very interested to get just a couple, quick hitter questions out there for the fans and the listeners to kind of get to know you a little bit better. What's the CD that's in your car right now? Or
CD.
Or let me say.
Actually, no, I do have a CD. It's 3-6 Mafia. And that was a birthday present from a while ago. Old school 3-6 Mafia. I haven't actually listened to it, but no, I usually have my iPod going.
What's on your playlist on your iPod?
Let's see what the last song was playing. It's going to be Future or Drake something.
Okay. Hip-hop. You're very influenced by hip-hop?
Definitely hip-hop and rap. Yeah, no country. I may be from Texas, but I'm not a country fan. Sorry.
Are you a fan of sports radio?
Yeah.
Sports Talk Radio?
Yeah, Sports Talk Radio. Who did I listen to? I listened to you guys before when I took the job, or actually I don't even know if they had offered me the job yet. I listened to you guys every day, trying to get acclimated, to the basically to Detroit sports as a whole, which was cool because the Red Wings were still playing, the Pistons were still playing. So I listened to you guys a lot. But if I have to say nationally, Russillo and Cannell is probably my favorite. And I said Mike and Mike, but I watch it. I'm not always listening in my car. I watch it.
Last movie that you saw?
Bad Moms, and it was great. It was really great.
A lot.
It's basically the mom version of Mean Girls.
A lot of people liked it. It was definitely a movie that a lot of women went to see. And you would rate it 2 thumbs up?
Definitely.
Great movie?
Yeah, if I had 3 thumbs, you'd get all 3.
On hot dogs, ketchup or no ketchup?
Ketchup and mustard and onions. I like the Chicago dog style.
Okay. Do you drink more beer or wine?
Depends on what night it is.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm watching any kind of sporting event, beer. If I'm hanging out with the girls and doing girl night, wine. Okay,
and this is the last question that we ask all guests that come in here. You got 4 tickets, and you can take anybody, dead or alive, to any sporting event, any venue. What sporting event do you go to, and who do you take?
Oh, that's tough. Mother Teresa. And I'm trying to think of the event I'd go to. Mother Teresa's on there. UCLA basketball coach.
John Wooden.
Yeah, John Wooden. He's in there.
Mother Teresa, John Wooden.
Billie Jean King.
There's 3. What sporting event? Where would you want to go?
Where can I get them all involved together? You know what I mean? Where are you going to get the greatest conversation from everybody?
Flushing Meadow, McEnroe Borg.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Back when McEnroe Connors. That'd be good. Yeah. U.S. Open, maybe.
Okay, so recap that for us. Billie Jean King, Mother Teresa.
Billie Jean King, Mother Teresa, John Wooden.
Watching a tennis match, Flushing Meadow,
yeah.
Connors McEnroe.
Connors McEnroe tennis match.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
Kristen Keith spent an hour with us. I hope everyone gets a chance to follow you, follow your work, doing great work covering the Tigers. And now in the fall, you're going to be working with the Pistons and the Red Wings as well. Thank you so much for coming in here and giving us some ideas regarding your work and the future of what you're going to be doing over there at Fox Sports Detroit. I greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.